Hi there. Chess. It's a surprisingly deep game. It's not just a matter of knowing how the pieces move, but being able to plan ahead as far as possible in multiple combinations to try and achieve ultimate victory. I'll admit, I'm not much good at the game. I know how the pieces move and have a little bit of strategy, but if I get to check, I then find myself chasing the remaining pieces around the board, galloping towards stalemate country. It's just not my game of choice. Many groups and societies think it's theirs, however, and it doesn't take much investigation to find a church, Freemasonic lodge or stately home that has a checkered black and white floor that you're made to walk across if you decide to visit. Not to mention the many music videos of so-called pop stars dancing on the visual prompt to remind us that we're all just pieces on a board. Chess may not be your game either, but it could be argued we all play the game every day on a grand scale, whether we're good at it or not. It obviously doesn't matter if you're black or white, to quote from Michael They Don't Care About Us Jackson. Both sides have many pieces that are pitted against one another, and you could substitute the obvious colour difference for variations on a theme. Male versus female, gay versus straight, or even country versus country. It's always one faction set against another. Imagine a set of Russian nesting dolls, and inside each one is a chessboard. Open the smallest one, you are the king or queen, congratulations. And if you have children, you learn to guide them around the board to enable them to know the rules and be armed to play their forthcoming games as best they can. A step up and you might have the work chessboard in the doll. The CEO and the board might be the king and queen, HR the bishop, the rooks are the accountants and contract writers in their ivory towers, etc., etc. You can go right up to an almost literal board, although this may still not be the grand chessboard, and there may be a king or queen with their family as the board equivalents. Bishops are religious factions, rooks are the government and law creators in their offices, and who does the knight symbolise? You may have noticed the symbolism of the checkerboard hats and vehicles of the emergency services. Police are made to keep pieces on the board following the rules. Fire services are there to help protect the pieces and their property from being destroyed, and the ambulance vehicles and workers are there to keep us playing as long as possible. They want us to believe there's only one way off the board, retirement in the form of death. One thing is for sure, the cannon fodder are the pawns like you and I out in front. The rest hide behind us and only move for strategic advantage or to protect themselves. You may suspect, but not necessarily register, that there are two common factions not seen. There are always the hidden hands who force the play, and there are the spectators. Both of these groups, you may have noticed, are not on the board at all. The funny thing is, the hidden hands seem to be playing several boards at once. They don't care about most outcomes because they have learnt they can both win by playing both sides to their mutual advantage, or to make us believe this is the true game when all the while there's another board with a real agenda playing out. The spectators are those not subject to the rules of the game. They are off the board because they're rich enough, influential enough, or perhaps have false identities. Maybe it's a group who none dare speak its name. These spectators get the jollies watching and shouting out suggested moves, and it's you and I, looked down upon in disdain, that get forced to think a certain way, believe we have to work a certain way, or kill our fellow souls because someone higher ranked on the chessboard deemed we should. As you get older and see the world is not a fizzy drink commercial, it gets harder to believe how one person can claim to have rule over another. How can one, made of flesh and blood, order another of flesh and blood to go and kill yet another for the sake of a disagreement of ideology, a construct indoctrinated and fostered since birth? How is it we are manipulated into believing the king is in fact the king, or the queen the queen? Power invested by God and a shiny tiara placed on your head, you say? I wasn't there to witness either of these miracles, so while we wait for the men with the special jacket to arrive, please excuse me if I don't doff my cap to ye. In the distant past, before the padded jackets though, I guess at some point a person decided God had chosen them to be king. Someone decided to follow this king and hire his friends as a force to convince others, probably the lords, Then peaceful farmers or hunter-gatherers were convinced that they were protected by these pitifully few enforcers until such time as the king was challenged about his rule, or what were now his lands, and in that case you had to protect him and his men at all costs, including your life, to maintain this marvellous kingdom. Oh, and you have to pay to finance it too. Those diamond tiaras don't make themselves, you know. Somehow it escaped these gentlefolk, or perhaps it was beaten out of them, that you only have one life to live, just like the rulers. Let them squander their lives out on a battlefield if they wish. I'm a great believer in leading by example. If you claim to be chosen by God and you believe fighting is the best action, get out in front with your family and ministers, and I just may be convinced. So how do we know those hiding behind us on the chessboard, claiming a portion of our lives in the form of taxes and obedience, are in fact people who are fit to lead? As the generations go on, it gets harder and harder for those born into this trap to discern true leaders from those that would order a boot on your face for raising a question about their leadership skills. The more time that passes, unfortunately, the more money is acquired by them for force, enslavement, spying, and building enough underground tunnels for them to hide in when we really do snap out of this belief handed down through the generations. Our eyes have been blinded to the long game. We are so busy trying to navigate the laws, trying to get just one positive thing done, fighting the inequities at work or in the system, or wrestling with the automated phone menus that keep us tied up for hours waiting to speak to a person in another country, that we don't see more cameras going up, yet more surveillance laws being passed. The push for the cashless society, and the hinting now that, hey, wouldn't it be a great idea to get rid of a standard fee on a car every year and just pay by the kilometre? And no, it wouldn't. Before you know it, splish, splash, splosh, we're all using our hands to scoop against the flow in a leaky boat up a brown and very smelly creek because the paddle just floated away. I have to say, I've met people from all three social groups in this world, those termed rich, middle class and poor, and I have to say, you can learn a great deal from two of the three. I seldom have learnt anything at all on the very few occasions I met someone from old money rich who believed they were superior to everyone else. Their minds are closed to the merest possibility of learning from what they deem beneath them. It's just a mindset drilled into them. I don't doubt that in their souls they see us as not having the inside information they have, and so we're just a worker bee made to bring into creation what they want for their pleasure. I see no creators from this group. No singers, no scientists, no great thinkers. They're leeches. How about sharing the hidden information with everyone else and seeing how superior you really are? The thing though is, the only real difference between us is whose sperm fertilized whose egg. If both of yours were from rich families, congratulations. But if you were not born into a highly wealthy family, I'm pleased to meet you. Welcome to the game. You may have noticed, though, that old money almost always marries old money. That's the long game again, and it ensures a lineage that keeps its money and assets in-house. I don't like to dwell on the fact I'm forced to play someone else's game most of my short life for someone else's benefit, which could just end up in a pointless stalemate. Maybe it's time we bartered with like-minded people, but I find it laughable that a lot of countries have a tax page devoted to extracting money for bartering. Go ahead, look it up. What a joke. Maybe we'll say that we're all doing each other favours instead, but this isn't a new idea, of course. I'm sure the player on the other side of the board from government on that one is called the Mafia or the Freemasons. At the end of the day, I can't point to any solutions. It's taken generations to get to this stage, and over that time many loopholes have been closed that might have allowed us to try and extract ourselves from it all. I watch the news and see fellows needlessly slaughtered. I see the corporations poisoning food just to make it look nice on the shelf. I see laws enacted to prevent people with empathy from helping and feeding those in need. And what do we see from the back row? Companies dicking everyday people with a tick of approval from the government. Police dicking with ordinary people's lives. The clergy dicking any young boy under puberty age. And another congratulations for the Queen because a royal descendant dicked someone in a related family. So join me, won't you, in a hip hip hooray for the newest inbred member of the elite to grace every news station and woman's magazine cover for the next month. Hip hip.
Hi there. A while ago I did a video called Welcome to the Chessboard. In it I explained how we are playing a game to the Game Master's rules. Those that are rich enough can remove themselves from the game somewhat and buy their way out of normal rules or virtually disappear from the grid of white and black due to having hidden homes, islands and bunkers as retreats from persecution. They pay to be kept out of the headlines and courts. Or maybe those off the board might be a member of a secretive organisation doing covert operations, or a member of an untouchable family in such things as finance or eugenics. Of course, if some on the way up get a bit full of themselves believing they're untouchable, or step out of line, their tenuous position of favour could be compromised. It's an easy thing to drag them in front of the chessboard pieces to make a case if they're unwilling to toe the line. The reason I bring this subject up is the fact again that everyone on the chessboard is most definitely susceptible to the rules made for society to one degree or another, and therefore can be removed as pieces by the hidden hand of the manipulating game master at strategic whim or as a sacrifice to protect a more valuable piece. The game master is susceptible to the rules of the game only insofar as to manipulate the pieces, of course, but is outside of ultimate consequences that befall the carnage on the board. After all, they're the unseen, and can always wipe the board, manufacture a reset, and play again for their own gain and amusement while retaining the experience and riches of the previous game. The thing about a full reset, though, is that you have to be able to know where every player is at any point at the end, to understand where they will be when the time comes to make sure. They will have to be dealt with as much as possible so that the next game is not spoiled by those bad-mouthing the rules or warning against playing the game at all. That's one for you to ponder. The reason I mention all this is to now point out that pieces who might think they are immune or have supposed invulnerability when inside the game because they have certain advantages are not. They have much at stake because they have been afforded much more movement and true privilege throughout the game up until now. Coveted pieces, though protected by the sacrifice of pawns, become more exposed as the front rows are removed from the game. I think we understand our given role, that somehow, through generations and happenstance of birth, we've been set up, so to speak, among the throng of pawns. But let us cast our eyes around to see who's next in line should we be sacrificed and fall. Some pieces are starting to realise they aren't as untouchable as they thought. Take Prince Andrew and vicariously the Queen and the royal family, who have been laying low as more information comes to light about how often he's been having pizza. Prince Philip, of course, famously said he would like to come back as a virus to humanity. He obviously doesn't realise he already is one, but that's an interesting quote nonetheless from a while ago, and interesting given the current times. Various members of the church have been taken down through their predilection of fresh pizza as well. More pieces to be removed from the back row, but this also taints religion as a whole, and when you realise whether you believe in the divine or not, countries and laws are set up on the premise that God is above all, kings, queens and state. Well, remove God, and you have no recognised divine entity to call upon when man-made laws alone come knocking. You can no longer say that God has a higher claim on your body and soul than the man or woman just following orders with a syringe, for instance. And so, with kings, queens and bishops removed from the board, we look to the knights, or police. You can see the defunding cries right now. No matter how ridiculous that seems, the only way to replace them is with military. So those saying get rid of the police rather than correct the structure back to serving in the community should be careful what they wish for. And now we can look at the castle. That may be seen as the family home, perhaps. I have a suspicion that rates will be going up soon, and up again. Housing prices have been artificially high for some time, which has seen a land tax boon for governments here in Australia. Eventually, people without income and unable to sell may end up having to walk away. Anything fixed in one place will be taxed heavily or susceptible to confiscation under the right conditions. And if what's been happening lately is any indication, governments are quite happy, under the guise of keeping you safe, to have you lose your job, home, or children, should there be a health scare. Because it's all for your ultimate benefit, or so they tell you. With the coming world plan, there can be no one left to look up to, no one to call for help, and no property owned to bunker down into when they've gone to so much trouble to eradicate the past. And now, take a look at recent corporation patents. Businesses do not patent something for a laugh, it costs money. Microsoft, for instance, has been patenting a system to prove work done by a person, and payments generated by the work done by the person can be tracked and paid in cryptocurrency. The patent has so many sixes in it as to look to be vying for a position at the right hand of the devil himself. And don't get me wrong, being paid for just moving around might be nice without all the tech. But do you think you'll have control over this? This will be the universal basic income, derived and provided by the acceptance of a jab that will allow it to occur. And you'll be made to work for the government to get it. Roadwork, cleaning toilets, keeping the community looking clean, etc. We've heard enticing promises before. A promise by the news of electric cars only to see it delivered with the catch of corporations owning the battery technology. Or a price and production line that is so ridiculously expensive as to not benefit the general populace at all. A catch so big that it mirrors Nikola Tesla having to stand by and watch his dreams destroyed for the sake of a greedy monopolistic dollar rather than the benefit of all mankind. Let me ask you, today, do you even have control over where your taxes or personal information goes? The fact of the matter is, like electric cars, personal robots, and your privacy, it's all sold, or placed on the back burner and stored for now, depending on how much money can be made off it. And so here we stand, the ultimate product, with minimal input from the companies wishing to profit from it. And believe you me, with a DNA-altering injection, they will patent you. They know they can't patent God's original work, but alter God's work, and yes, now they can claim a patent and own the title. It's a joke, a jest, a corruption. The usurpation of God's work for man's greed. And don't doubt they will push this to the full extent of their own made-up laws. They've spent their lives tweaking God's world and laws and claiming it as their own, and they don't intend to stop at any expense. We have gone from privacy as a given to having to sign all our details to a company just to communicate with people we attended the same school with. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. There will come a time very soon now where you'll have to make a choice. Man's world, an artificial world leeching off the natural world, telling you what to do and changing natural law to sell it back to you, or God's world, where you can have a difficult but free life without those claiming to own you, so you might learn real lessons from nature. If you don't believe in a deity, let's put it like this. It's a choice between a world of natural law which is harsh but fair to man, with no allowed interference but that which an individual man allows, or a world run by AI, with every movement and reaction predicted and given to those who claim power and who ultimately believe they own you and your heritage. And remember, they have always claimed technology to be at least 10 years in advance of where we think it is, so you ain't seen nothing yet. So to make a long story short, the ultimate product is you, if you allow it. It's the reason Microsoft patents a new cryptocurrency that pays more the more you do. You'll never see the money from this yourself unless it's a universal basic income, brought about by a forced vaccine, and you can bet it will just be a small portion of what is paid to them. It's the reason Elon Musk is shooting hundreds of satellites into orbit to track you without a whisper. It's the reason swabs are taken. It's the reason phone tracing apps are implemented. It's the way fear is used to mask a flu-like death toll, to enforce removal of liberties, and masks are now becoming mandatory. How much were you ignored when your privacy was at stake, and now your life and your children's lives have obviously been sold down the river from birth? The idiocracy of the whole thing is that the taxpayer has paid for everything. The police to enforce it all, the governments to call the shots, the ideas that led to the innovations, the investments for the stock market, and the engineers that have paved the way for the underground bases and the island complexes. And yet we are fed the rhetoric that people are the problem, while they make more laws, abuse more children, and slowly wipe the chessboard of all the pieces, ready to start again with a clear advantage from the throng that will now be thrown back into the Stone Age, or worse. The added joke that animals are a cause of different strains of the flu family are just another reason to remove them from farms and households that sell them to companies or use them for homestead food. Having seen vegetables ploughed under, it won't be long before we see homestead animals having to be destroyed, sacrificed to the COVID gods. No longer will we be able to have food bearing gardens and pasture. There might be insects to eat, or nothing. After all, we're all in this together, and we're saving lives, aren't we? This is a joke at you and your children's and their children's expense, quite literally with taxpayer dollars. You can choose to hear or not to hear, but the information is given free here for you for a reason. You may want to act on it, or you may not. But given this information, I can only say as far as government goes, with their one hand out to the taxpayer and the other hand out to big business, and very little to do in the interests of the people, we will live in their dream, rather than our own.